Hi, I'm Jeff Mast, President of Mast Wealth Management. I'm very honored and privileged to be here today with Louise Harrison, George Harrison's sister.
My brother had invited me to come up to New York when they were going to do the Ed Sullivan show because he realized that as previously he'd planned to come out and visit me in the Midwest, but with all of the hullabaloo going on and the Beatlemania, he wasn't going to be allowed to travel to the Midwest, so he invited me to come up and be with him. So we got there, it was on a Friday afternoon on the 7th of February, and they had just flown in from Paris. Anyway, in amongst all of the confusion that was going on, George sort of went off into his bedroom for a little while, and he came back and he said to me, I really don't feel good. He said, I've just called the hotel to see if they have a doctor, and they're going to send up the doctor. So he said, will you, come on in the bedroom with me? So I said, sure. So we went into the bedroom. The doctor came up, Dr. Gordon. He was the hotel official doctor at the hotel. And he examined George, and he said, oh, my goodness, he said, this is one sick puppy. He's may not have used those words, right. But he said, he's at 104 degree temperature, and he said his throat is just really, his strep throat is just really almost unbearable. He said, I think I need to get him into hospital. Anyway, round about that point, Brian had come into the room to see what was going on, and Brian Epstein, yeah. And so the doctor said, I think we better get this youngster into hospital. And Brian just about had a heart attack. He said, oh, we can't let anybody know. There was about, probably 25 reporters outside of the door of the suite that we were in. It was the presidential suite in the Plaza Hotel. And, there was a main room and then the 2 or 3 bedrooms. So the reporters were outside the main part of the suite in the corridor. And he said, we can't let all of these people know that somebody's sick, So anyway, the doctor said, well, maybe we could get a nurse. And then Brian says, no, I don't want anybody from outside to know. So then the doctor looked at me and he says, well, you're his sister? And I said, yes. So he said, well, that's perfect. He said, you're probably the only woman in New York that would be sane enough to be in the room with him, And so he delegated me to be the nurse. So I suddenly became Florence Nightingale, And here's me that never ever wants to be around anybody that's even going to cough, But anyway, they made me move into the room with him. Of course, there were two beds in the room, obviously. But it wasn't the first time I'd slept in the same room as my kid brother. So the doctor gave me a big list of different, all the different medications that I had to give him. Like almost every hour I had to give him something. And the thing that George hated the most was an ice pack, an ice collar, right, that they wanted him to put on every hour or so and keep it on for a few minutes. And that was the thing. He said, I don't mind all these medicines and things. He said, but that ice pack is horrible. So anyway, we, proceeded. The next day he had to go to, Brian called from the theater the Ed Sullivan Theatre, where they were setting up camera angles and all of that kind of thing. And so he called and he said, we really need George to come down, because the other 3 had gone and George just stayed in bed. Right. So I called Dr. Gordon again and I said, what do you think? They want me to take him down to the theatre. So he said, well, he came back and he checked his temperature again. It was down to 102. He said, well, I don't know. He said, he's still very, very sick. He said, but, if it's really that necessary, make sure you don't keep him out longer than about an hour. So he kind of charged me with this sacred duty, So we called, the limo came and we went down to the theatre. During that time, there's a bunch of pictures which maybe you might want to have were taken by Deso Hoffman, who was their official photographer, and he took a bunch of pictures of us, and you can really see how sick George was at that point. And of course, all the photographers came around. There must have been over 100, and they were all wanting him to smile and do this and do that. And finally, after it was getting close to being an hour, and I went over to Ed Sullivan. I said, look, I'm sorry, but I really need to get him back to the hotel. And so he said, oh, okay. And apparently Brian had quietly told him privately, that George wasn't feeling too good. So we got back to the hotel. Anyway, I think it was the next day, on the Sunday, before they went to the theatre to do the show, he was thinking he was still about 102. And each day, Dr. Gordon was coming in and checking him and, watching his progress and everything, checking his throat. And so it was before we actually went to do the Ed Sullivan show. And George I think they had just given the Beatles 5 or 6 albums, promotional albums that they could sign for people. And so George said to the doctor, hey, I'll sign one of these for you. And so he signed it to him. And then I think he signed another one for him. And he said, here, if you have a close friend or something, So that was all, what was happening there in the hotel room. So I had come down with George and then went into the audience and sat in the 7th row. But I was more concerned about, sitting there trying to will my energy into him so that he could keep on standing up, just to hope that he would still be okay. And so I didn't really notice much of what went on as far as which songs they sang or anything like that, because I was too busy concentrating on him. Well, really, I suppose it was Dr. Gordon who helped him to become the quiet Beatle by suggesting to him that he try to not say anything or do anything with his voice until the strep throat was cured. Right. And so, of course, all of the reporters, he had to still go to some of the press conferences, to be there in person. But he didn't say much, except I think one question when they were asked, don't you guys ever get a haircut? And George says, yeah, I had one yesterday. And he actually had, because I'd seen a picture of him and his hair was right down over his eyes. And I had spoken to him when he was in Paris. And I said, hey, you need to get a haircut because you won't be able to see where you're going. We were just joking with him. Right. And so he had himself cut his hair just so that his eyebrows could show. So he really had a haircut the day before. But that was how he got the name of being the quiet one. He wasn't never, ever really ever quiet.